Hello students, welcome to Gyanvihar School of Education, Suresh Gyanvihar University. I'm Dr. Sonia Korbansal and today I will be teaching you about psychomotor base for learning. And the subject is psychology of teaching and learning. So my learning objective of today's class are to enable you students about the understanding and classification of Bloom's taxonomy, and special focus will be on psychomotor base for learning. So let's understand what is Bloom's taxonomy and what is psychomotor base for learning. Before starting the psychomotor base, and let me introduce you students about Benjamin S. Bloom. Benjamin S. Bloom's full name was Benjamin Samuel Bloom, and he was born on February 21st, 1913, died in September 13, 1999, Chicago, United States, America. He was the citizen of that USA, and he was PhD in education, and he was educational psychologist, and he was employed in American Educational Research Association. So this was a little introduction of Benjamin Samuel Bloom, students. So now let's understand about Bloom's taxonomy. Before understanding about it, let me introduce you a brief introduction about Bloom's taxonomy. So Bloom's taxonomy comprises three domains for learning: the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor, and assigns to each of these domains a hierarchy that corresponds to different level of learning. It's important to note that the different levels of thinking defined within the each domain of the taxonomy are hierarchical. And in other words, we can say that level subsumes the level that comes before it. So if we look at the cognitive domain, for example, which is represented, we can see infer that before a student can conduct an analysis, they might need to know the method of analysis, understanding, and different elements to review and consider which method to apply. So this is really very important to understand about Bloom's taxonomy, that Bloom's taxonomy is directly relating to the different levels of thinking defined within each domain of the taxonomy hierarchy. So this is how it is represented, and to go more elaborated way, we can say that Bloom's taxonomy in full Bloom's taxonomy of learning. So when we are talking about it, so Bloom's taxonomy is actually in full reference. We are talking about the Bloom's taxonomy of learning domains. So learning domains are, strictly speaking, Bloom's taxonomy educational objectives. Was initially the first part published 1956 under the leadership of American academic and educational expert Dr. Benjamin S. Bloom. Bloom's taxonomy was originally created in and for an academic context, the development commencing in 1948 when Benjamin Bloom chaired a committee of educational psychologists based in American education, whose aim was to develop a system of categories of learning behavior to assist in the design and assessment of educational learning. Bloom's taxonomy has since been expanded over many years of Bloom's and other contributions. Contributors notably like Anderson, Korthwal, these were the main collaborators of Bloom's taxonomy as recently as 2001. So, whose theories extended Bloom's work to far more complex levels than the explained here, and which are relevant to the field of academic education than to corporate training and development. So, where indicated, Bloom's taxonomy tables are adapted and reproduced with permission from Allen and Bacon, Watson, USA. So, being the publisher and copyright owner of Taxonomy of Educational Objectives, Bloom's et al. In 1956. So most corporate trainers and HR professionals, coaches, and teachers will benefit significantly by simply understanding the basics of Bloom's taxonomy. As we are telling you now, so before that, you have to understand that primarily Bloom's taxonomy was created for academic education. Now, however, it is relevant to all types of learning now. And interestingly, at the outset, Bloom believed that education should focus on mastery of subjects and the promotion of higher forms of thinking rather than a utilitarian approach to simply transferring facts. Bloom demonstrated decades ago that most teaching tended to be focused on fact transfer and information recall. So this is how everything is based on recall and recognition, what we call. So understand that students, that the lowest level of training rather than true meaningful personal deployment. So Bloom demonstrated decades ago that most teaching tended to be focused on fact transfer and information recall, the lowest level of training, rather than true meaning personal development. And this remains a central challenge for educators and trainers in modern times. Much corporate training is also limited to non participative, unfeeling knowledge transfer, and all those boring PowerPoint presentation, which is reasons alone to consider the breadth and depth approach exemplified in Bloom's model. So now let's understand how it developed. So Benjamin S. Bloom, who was born in 1913 and died in 1999, attained degrees at Pennsylvania State University in 1935. He joined the Department of Education at the University of Chicago in 1940s and attained a PhD in education in 1942, during which he specialized in examining. Here he met his mentor Ralph Taylor, with whom he first began to develop his ideas for developing a system, or we can call that taxonomy, or specification to enable educational training and learning objectives to be planned and measured properly, improving the effectiveness of developing mastery instead of transferring facts for mindless recall. So Bloom continued to develop the learning taxonomy model through 1960s and was appointed Charles H. Swift Distinguished Service Professor at Chicago in 1970s. Bloom also served as an advisor of education to several overseas governments, including the Israel and India as well. So Bloom's and his colleagues' initial attention was focused on the cognitive domain only, which was the first published part of Bloom's taxonomy featured in the publication. Taxonomy of Educational Objectives, Handbook 1, the Cognitive Domain. Bloom, Engelhardt, First, Hill, Carthwold in 1956. So just understand, students, that this handbook, second, the Taxonomy of Educational Objectives, it was related now to the affective domain. Bloom, Marcia, and Carthwold worked in it. As the title implies, deals with the details of the second domain, that was the affective domain, and was published in 1964. And then various people suggested detail for the third psychomotor domain as well, which explains why this domain detail varies in different representations of the complete Bloom taxonomy. The three most popularly referenced versions of the psychomotor domain seem to be those of R.H. Dove, 1967-70, E.J. Simpson in 1966-72, A.J. Harrow, 1972. As such, Bloom's taxonomy describes the three domain structure within which the detail may vary, especially for the third domain. But we are going to understand each and everything in that way. In my earlier videos, I have told you about cognitive and affective motor in a detailed way. So, if we are involving, so Bloom's taxonomy has therefore since 1956 provided a basis for ideas which have been used and developed around the world by academics, educators, teachers, and trainers for the preparation of learning evaluation material, and also provided the platform for the complete Bloom's taxonomy, including the details for the third psychomotor domain. So, as we see it today, collectively, these concepts which make up the whole Bloom taxonomy continue to be useful and very relevant to the planning and design of school of college, university, or education, adult and corporate training courses as well, teaching and lesson plans, and learning materials. They also serve as a template for the evaluation of training, teaching, learning, and development within every aspect of education and industry. And if you are involved in the design, delivery, or evaluation of teaching, training courses, learning, and lesson plans, you should find Bloom's taxonomy useful as a template framework for simple checklist to ensure you are using the most appropriate type of training or learning in order to develop the capabilities required wanted. So, training or learning design and evaluation need not cover all the aspects of taxonomy. Just make sure there is coverage of the aspects that is appropriate. As such, if in doubt about your training aims, check what's possible and perhaps required by referring Bloom's taxonomy. So, first, don't be put off by the language of the apparent complexity of the Bloom's taxonomy at this basic level. It's a relatively simple and logical model. And taxonomy means a set classification of principal students or structure, and domain simply means category. Bloom and his colleagues were academics looking at learning as a behavioral science and writing for the other academics, which is why I never called it Bloom's learning structure, which would perhaps have made more sense to people in the business world. Interestingly, this example of the use of technical language provides a helpful lesson in the learning itself, namely, if you want to get an idea across the people. So, you should try to use language that your audience will easily recognize and understand. So, Bloom's taxonomy underpins the classical knowledge, attitude, and skills, and the structure of learning method and evaluation. And aside from the even simpler Kilpatrick learning evaluation model, Bloom's taxonomy of learning domains remains the most widely used system of its kind and its education particularly, and also industry and corporate training. So it's easy to see why, because it is such a simple, clear, and effective model both for explanation and application of learning objectives, teachings, and training methods and measurements of learning outcomes. So Bloom's taxonomy provides an excellent structure for planning, designing, assessing, and evaluating training and learning effectiveness. The model also serves as a sort of checklist by which we can ensure that the training is planned to deliver all the necessary developments for students, trainees, and learners, and a template by which you can assess the validity and coverage of any existing training, be it a course, curriculum, or an entire training and development program for a large organization. So it is really fascinating, students, that Bloom's taxonomy model, which was given by Benjamin S. Bloom and his collaborators in 1956, 64, and Kilpatrick, actually the evaluation is like Kilpatrick's Learning Evaluation 1959 remain classical reference models and tools into the 21st century. This is because concepts such as Bloom's taxonomy, Kilpatrick's model, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, McGregor's XY theory, SWOT analysis, and Brain's transactional analysis theory. So, to name a few other examples, are timeless, as such will always be relevant to the understanding and development of people and organization. So, let's understand about Bloom's taxonomy in a more effective way that I'm going to explain to you with further my more slides. So, let's understand, students, that Bloom's taxonomy have three types of learning, and there is more than one type of learning. Committee of college led by Benjamin S. Bloom, he identified three domains of educational objectives. First is cognitive, then mental skills is related to this domain, and most importantly, knowledge. Then affective part, this domain relates to growth in feeling and emotional areas, attitude. Then there comes the third domain, that is psychomotor, manual or physical skills. So that's how Benjamin S. Bloom and his collaborators worked on these three types of learning, or we can call the three domains of taxonomy, which were cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. So, Bloom's taxonomy provides an excellent structure for planning, designing, assessing, and evaluating training and learning effectiveness. So, as I have told you, that this model also serves as a sort of checklist by which you can ensure that training is planned to deliver all the necessary development of students, trainees, or learners, and a template by which you can assess the validity and coverage of any existing training, be it a course, a curriculum, or an entire training and development program for a large organization. So, students, let's discuss the function of educational objectives. The objectives are having following functional objectives, which I'm telling you. So, first of all, it provides the desired direction to educational activities. Whatever is being done by the teacher and the student, this must have a particular objective. So, whatever the objectives are set, so educational activities are getting proper direction if we are setting the objectives. Then it also provides a basis for systematizing or planning an educational program. So, give unity or coherence to an educational program as well. This also provides the basis for the measurement or growth and thus guarantee valid evaluation. So, students, it also helps focus attention on proper attributes of teaching and evaluation. So, this is how the functions of educational objectives are discussed. It also helps in grading learner experiences and evaluation materials as well. It also guides educational decisions in curricular or co-curricular areas as well. And educational objectives also guide in the selection of relevant content, as what to teach and what not to teach if we are deciding the objectives. It also guides improvement in education. It gives meaning to and clarify the structure of content in curriculum. It also helps to make learning functional in a proper application way. So this is not only related to theoretical knowledge, it also applies its function in practical form. It helps to identify weaknesses and strengths of pupils in learning. It facilitates communication among educational workers. Now let's discuss students' development in instructional objectives, how it happened. So in 1960s, first we are going to discuss about it, and then we will understand about psychomotor domain of learning, because it's really very important to understand how the instructional objectives develop by the different concepts. So in 1960s, a vigorous movement of examination reform was developed among educational professionals in India. American subject education experts who were suggesting the introduction of new lesson plans having objectives. So there were EBOs, LE, RLOs. So full form is about expected behavioral outcomes, that calls EBOs, and LE, that is called learning experiences, and then RLOs, learning outcomes. So NCRT objective based evaluation and the American based objective based evaluation developed the initial curriculum scheme, and the evaluation unit of NCRT made commendable efforts to reform structure of our examinations during 1960s and 70s. The NCRT version of the blood system led to the horizontal approach to lesson planning by the Regional Institute of Education, Mysore, RIEM. So, a question was raised at the time whether educators were evaluating product which is not purposefully developed and probably might not actually have been developed. So, an attempt was made to shift the focus from product to process. Yes, it was a shift from product to process. So, this is how the lesson plan was developed in earlier stages. So, this is how in this lesson plan, expected behavioral outcomes are to be realized through teaching and learning experiences. By a given content of the syllabus, this content is termed as real learning outcomes. Now, RIEM faculty developed the 14 expected behavioral outcomes: knowledge, recognition, recall. So, understanding, seeing relationship, and citing, discrimination, classification, interpretation. Then verification, generalization, application, reasoning, formulating hypothesis, establishing hypothesis, inferences, and predictions were also associated with them. Now, knowledge, understanding, and application, they are called broad instructional objectives. Then recognition to prediction. These are actually put into the category of expected behavioral outcomes. Processes. Now, for example, when a pencil or pen is shown to the pupil, and if they are asked what it is, the answer would be pen or pencil by recognition of the object. That means they are recalling and they are recognizing the object. Similarly, when we ask what is the difference between pen and pencil, the answer or expected behavior outcomes is that there is an ink in a pen and lead in the pencil and so on. So, educational objective states both what behavior is intended to be developed, curricular aspect, and what actual behavior is developed and tested, evaluation aspect. Usefulness of the taxonomical classification, useful in identifying the meaningful level at which the learner working. So, let's understand the usefulness of that taxonomical classification. So it's really very useful in identifying the meaningful level at which the learner is working, because it is recommended in Bloom's taxonomy that to go to the upper level, learning of lower level is really very important. Then the techniques of tools of assessment can be relevantly decided upon and develop their categorization becomes easy and very clear. It is also helpful in translating into practice. The principle of comprehensiveness evaluation by ensuring proper coverage of various aspects of pupil growth is also related to this. The examination of the evaluation devices in terms of their validity will be facilitated. The evaluation is helpful in synthesizing or synthesis of the various dimensions of the pupil's growth, helps in identifying and grading teaching learning situation, preparation and analysis of textbook based on well defined objectives. So the classification provide a bridge between teachers and evaluators, curriculum and research workers, psychologists and other behavioral scientists. So the taxonomy has also opened new avenues for research in education. Teachers motivated to undertake experimentation on objective based teaching and testing as well. Now, students, let's understand about psychomotor domain in detail. That the psychomotor domain encompasses the ability of learners to physically accomplish tasks and perform movement and skills. So there are several different versions and different versions including different hierarchies, and the examples here fall into Harrow's theory of psychomotor domain. So this hierarchy ranges from reflexes and basic movement to non-discursive communication and meaningfully expressive activity. So psychomotor domain is related to levels of attainment of neuromuscular coordination. It is demanding that. Then levels of coordination goes up, the action becomes more defined, speedy, and automatic. So describe the ability to physically manipulate a tool or instrument like a hand or a hammer. Focus in change or development in behavior or skills is also related to that. Now let's understand the psychomotor hierarchy, students, which is divided into different categories. And first of all, we have to understand about reflex. So sample learning outcome is about instinctively respond to a physical stimulus, whatever it is given. Then like assessment activity we can give to our students, that is a game of dodgeball. And rational or justification of this component is that learners must react dodge the balls that are being thrown at them, allowing them to develop their reflexive skills. Then basic fundamental movements is the another component, another category in this domain, that is, and if we talk about simple sample learning outcome, that performs a simple action including running and throwing. So sample assessment activity that can be given a game of dodgeball again than in that. So rational would be related to that learner must run and throw the actively engage the opposing team and allowing them to develop these skills. Now let's understand the third category, that is perceptual abilities. And sample learning outcome use more than one ability to integrate different sensory perceptions. And in this activity which can be given to students, that a game of catch or saucer or another game involving movement and passing. So rational learners must be integrating running, visual information about the position of the ball, and the predictive information about the future position of the ball. So this is how perceptual abilities are also developed in psychomotor domain. Then we are assessing the physical abilities. So it is about sustaining an activity for a set period of time. How long you can sustain it. So the activity which is related to that and which can be given to the students is that can be run for 25 minutes steadily. And the rationale is about that this activity is a measure of the learner's stamina and physical fitness as well. Now skill movements. So skill movements are is the category where it is about adapting one's behavior and movement to better achieve goals. A saucer or other strategic games like football, hockey can be given to the students to play for assessing the skill movements. And the rationale behind that is this activity allows teams to change their strategy and individuals to change their physical behavior depending on the response of the other team. So now non-discursive communication, sample learning outcome express oneself through purposeful movement and activity. So sample assessment activity, a saucer or other strategic game, football, hockey is there. Rational, these games all involve teamwork, strategy, and integrative and purposeful movement. Successful teams must integrate all of their senses, communicate through movement, and use a variety of adaptive strategies. So, this is about non discursive communication. Now, let's discuss the levels which are given by Dave. And Dave includes the following levels of arrangement in the concept, in the terms of coordination. So it's about imitation, first of all. It represents by covert inner rehearsal system, impulsion and overt repetition, manipulation following direction, selection, and fixation. Now, let's talk about precision also, according to Dave, and it talks about reproduction and control. Then here comes articulation, which is related to sequence and harmonic. Then naturalization, automation, automatism, interiorization. So these are some references, students, that you can study more about them. And I really believe that you will be studying and revising psychomotor domain of Bloom's taxonomy. Now, students, this is the MCQ time, and I really believe that you will be giving answers one by one, and you will be putting it uh, in my comment box as well. So, the first question: the psychomotor domain involves learning, knowledge, manner, physical movement. So the correct answer is physical movement, because the psychomotor domain is defined as it involves the physical movement itself. So second question is about which are not learning domain: cognitive, affective, affirmative, or psychomotor. As we have seen that Benjamin S. Bloom and his collaborators have classified the three domains of learning, which are cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. So the correct answer is affirmative, which is not a learning domain at all. Now, the ability to throw a dart and consistently hit the bull's eye is an example of. Now these are the questions, students, that I'm asking from you, and you have to answer in my comment box as well. So, the ability to throw a dart and consistently hit the bull's eye is an example of level of the psychomotor domain. Is it perception, origination, complex overtrip response, or mechanism? Just write down the correct answer in my comment box. And then next question is about improvising to complete a task in an unfamiliar environment is indicative of the dash level of the psychomotor domain. Is it adaptation, set, perception, or guided response? So, correct answer you can put in my comment box. Hurry up, students. And I really believe that you have learned a lot about uh, Bloom's taxonomy and its psychomotor domain also. See, students, in the nutshell, I can say that psychomotor domain is something that is really leading you towards a good idea of what the psychomotor domain says. We have seen about various psychomotor skills like imitations, manipulations, and develop precision, articulation, naturalization. So these are the terms and categories which are given by Benjamin S. Bloom in psychomotor skills. So imitation leads to copying of someone who is doing in front of you. So manipulation, following instructions. So these are related, all are related activities which are done in the classroom situation as well. Then develop precision, articulation, combine, integrate related skills. So naturalization, automate, become expert. So these are something that is really very important to understand. All right, students. So now we have to discuss that, we have to understand that psychomotor domain is actually includes physical movement, coordination, and the use of motor skill areas. And these are the development of these skills requires practice and is measured in terms of speed, precision, distance, procedures, or techniques in education. So the seven major areas which I have already discussed with you, I'm again going to tell you in a nutshell that what it is about that. So first category belong to, which we have already seen that it was belonging to perception, and perception was somehow belonging to the ability to use sensory cues to guide motor activity. This ranges from sensory stimulation through selection to translation. So this is how it is really very important, students, that you must all understand about psychomotor domain. And psychomotor domain is about, the first category is perception. For example, detects the non-verbal communication cues. So non-verbal communication cues is those which we are receiving from the students in the classroom as well. So what it is and how it is developing in the classroom and classroom students learning, it's really a questionable thing. And psychomotor domain definitely gives an answer to it, that it has different categories with it. So when we are talking about that, estimate where a ball will land and it is thrown, and then moving to the correct location to catch the ball, adjust heat to store the correct temperature by smell and taste of food. That if the okay, if you are getting the perception if someone is cooking the food and you are getting smell that the food is burning, So immediately you will switch off the gas or you will just turn it same. So adjusting heat or stove to correct temperature by smell or taste of food, this is related to perception. It is actually guiding the sensory cues to guide motor activity, what you have to do. So this ranges from sensory stimulation through cue simulation, selections, and translation as well. So adjust the height of the forks and on a fork lift by comparing where the fork are in relation to the pallet. So the words which we can use in the lesson plan, maybe the related to keywords like chooses, describes, detects, differentiates, distinguishes, identifies, isolates, relates, selects, etc. The next category we have discussed is about set. So set is readiness to act. It includes mental, physical, emotional sets. These three sets are disposition that determine a person's response to different situations, sometimes called mindsets also. So, for example, if you are knowing and acting upon a sequence of steps in a manufacturing process, which is recognizing one's abilities and limitations, shows desire to learn a new process motivation. So, this subdivision of psychomotor is closely related to the responding of phenomena, subdivision of the affective domain, and the keywords which are used in lesson plans as well, when the teacher is planning in the terms of educational objectives, the teacher may use like begins, displays, explains, moves, proceeds, reacts, shows, states, fall into. So these are all related to something really very good mindset. And if the mindset is proper, psychomotor domain will be definitely very high on the higher side. Then next term, which we have studied, that is guided response. So the early stage in learning a complex skill that includes imitation and trial and error. Adequacy of performance is achieved by practicing. So, for example, performs a mathematical equation as demonstrated, follows instructions to build a model, and responds hand signals of the instructor while learning to operate a forklift. So, the keywords which can be used by a teacher in this category, which can be like copies, traces, follows, reacts, produces, responds. So these are some systems that are given to that. Then next category which we have seen, so I'm going to repeat, I'm going to just wind up in that way, so that we have seen that mechanism. So this is the immediate stage in learning a complex skill, and learned responses have become habitual, and movements can be performed with some confidence and proficiency as well. So for example, use of personal computer, repair a leaking faucet, driving a car, this is all learning about mechanism and learning well about how it works. So keywords would be adjoining here like assembling, calibrate, construct, dismantles, displays, fastens, fixes, grinds, heats, manipulates, measures, mends, mixes, organizes, sketches. So these are all actually keywords related to that. Then complex overt response is the another category which we have discussed. So the skillful performance of motor skills that involve complex movement patterns, proficiency is indicated by a quick, accurate, and highly coordinated performance, and it requires minimum of energy because it is complex overt response. And this category students includes the performing without hesitation and automatic performance. And for example, players are often utter sounds of satisfaction or expletives as soon as they hit a tennis ball or throw a football, because they can tell by the feat of the act that what was the result will produce. All right, students. So it, for example, maneuvers a car into a tight parallel parking spot operating a computer quickly and very accurately, or maybe it is displaying the competency while playing the piano. So these are all related to complex overt response, and the keywords which a teacher might use in the lesson plan for behavioral objectives that will assemble, builds, calibrates, constructs, dismantles, displays, fastens, fixes, grinds, heats, manipulates, measures, mends, mixes, organizes, sketches. So the keywords are the same as mechanism you must have seen, but we'll have adverbs or adjectives that indicate the performance is quicker and better and more accurate now. All right, students, the next category that we have seen, it's about adaptation. So adaptation is that skill where the skills are well developed and the individual can modify movement patterns to fit special requirements in any activity. For example, if the individual is responding effectively to unexpected experiences, modifying for instructions to meet the needs of the learners, perform a task with machine that it was not originally intended to do, machine is not damaged and there is no danger in performing the new task. So the keywords which a teacher might use, like adapting, alters, changes, rearranges, reorganizes, revises, varies, these are all related to adaptation category of psychomotor domain. Now the last category which we have talked about, that was origination. So creating new movement patterns to fit a particular situation or specific problem. Learning outcome emphasize creatively based upon highly developed skills. So examples constructs a new theory and develop, for example, like developing an comprehensive training program, creating a new gymnastic routine as well. So the keywords would be like arranging, building, combining, composing, constructing, creating, designing, making, originates. So these are the psychomotor domain. This is the psychomotor domain, students, that we have discussed till now in very elaborative manner. So this is belong to Benjamin S. Bloom. And there are other various domains also related to psychomotor domain, but we have discussed in this lecture about Bloom's taxonomy in detail. So students, see you in the next class with more interesting lectures. Until then, stay safe, stay happy, and keep learning. Thank you, students.